Hi, this is Peter Wooding. Welcome to Christian Weekly News. Now, as many have been looking back on the life of Margaret Thatcher with mixed views on some of the decisions she made during her time as Prime Minister, in this week's programme we'll be speaking to three key Christian leaders about some of the issues they're standing up for in public life today, including Lord Carey, Baroness Caroline Cox and MP Fiona Bruce. The former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey, recently wrote an article in the Daily Mail on Easter Sunday challenging the Prime Minister about the marginalisation of Christians in the UK. We spoke to Lord Carey to find out more about why he's standing up on issues like this today. Recently, in his article for the Daily Mail, Lord Carey accused David Cameron of betraying Christians, saying many believers doubted the Prime Minister's sincerity in pledging to protect their freedoms. So what are Lord Carey's greatest concerns affecting Christians in the nation today?
I think where we are as a country is that we're at a crossroads. We could go blindly on and confuse emotion and sentimentality with truth. And we've got to stand up for God's word, God's truth, the importance of marriage at the very heart of civic and family life. If we give way on that, then all kind of things will eventually be surrendered. And that's why I think this coming debate in the House of Lords is absolutely crucial. And we've got to pray that we win that battle. If we don't, there are other battles beyond that we will have to continue fighting. All is not lost, but it's a very divisive and decisive battle coming ahead. So this is very important for our country, really. So the challenge for the churches is to get behind the opposition to the bill. And I want to plead with church leaders, make your voice heard. Get out there with us and show that you care about it.
Speaking at the recent Wilberforce Academy, Lord Carey described how Christians engaging in public life were like shock troops.
You are more like shock troops who are called to lead in the battle, to challenge our political leaders, to stand along brave Christians as you have done already in law courts. You are here to take the fight wherever it leads.
The image of shock troops really comes from the war years, the way that the Germans went into battle by, first of all, sustained attack. And of course, we know the Roman army did exactly the same thing. You went in with your strongest forces. You made the greatest impact you could possibly make. And that is how I see Christian concern. We're doing that in a sustained and good and clear way, not in an offensive way, because again, this is where the image breaks down. If you use a military image, we're not killing people. But what we're trying to do is to make people aware of the issues. So the shock troopers go in to pave the way, open up the issues, and other forces can come in behind, explain. So that's what I see, that's what we're trying to do. Getting the headlines, making people aware what the issues are, and then allowing time to develop in which we can talk about the matter in a very considered and intelligent way.
So how should Christians create a greater awareness of key issues affecting the nation?
Well, we can do a lot practically. This is the worry, I think. First of all, we've got to make the issues better known. There are so many people today in our churches who really don't know what the issues are. They're way behind, because where do people pick up their news about Christian attitudes? They don't pick it up from church papers. They don't pick it up from the television. They pick it up from the daily newspapers generally. So we're way behind in our information. Christian concern is terrific in getting the information out there. So that's one thing. The second thing is developing from that is really the importance of Christians praying for the situation, making our voice heard, writing to MPs. I can tell you this, that MPs are very nervous about public opinion. and they are very influenced by public opinion, especially in those borderline constituencies. So let's get and make our voices heard. I know how much I am persuaded by the huge number of letters I read. If so many people are writing in, I think, there's something must be here that's making people very worried, and we're not worrying people enough.
Lord Carey concluded by highlighting the key role the Christian Legal Centre and Christian Concern were playing in representing people being marginalised for their beliefs.
The Christian Legal Centre and the general work of Christian Concern, really one aim is behind it, and that is to make people aware of what is happening in our society. And the Christian Legal Centre, its particular occupation is to represent Christians who are in difficulty. And that's why we need money to support. It's very expensive indeed to do this. And I know from talking to Paul Diamond and other senior lawyers, the amount of effort that goes into that to win the case when there's such prejudice against Christian thinking. That Christian Legal Centre is vital for the work today.
Now, another key Christian leader seeking to do that is Baroness Caroline Cox. Coming up, she gives us an update on a bill she introduced into Parliament, highlighting her concerns over the implications for women and Sharia law.
The essence of the initiative is deep concern over developments in our country, which are reflected in the establishment of at least 85 Sharia courts or Sharia councils in the United Kingdom, and probably many more we don't know about. The worrying thing there is, well, there are two aspects that are worrying. One is that Sharia law, in its traditional formulation, is inherently discriminatory against women. And there is tremendous pressure on women in those communities to seek mediation or arbitration, which is based on Sharia law rulings. And many women really suffer as a result of that discriminatory policy against them. And in fact, one Muslim lady said to me, you know, I feel betrayed by Britain. I came to this country to get away from all this. It's actually worse here than it was in the country I came from. Britain is meant to be committed to promoting gender equality and doing away with gender discrimination. Well, I'm afraid it is entrenched and causing a lot of suffering to a lot of women in this country at the present time. So that's the first concern. The second concern is that it is completely unacceptable in a democracy to have a parallel quasi-legal system operating, because that undermines the fundamental principle of one law for all. So these are serious issues, and an attempt to try to address them became, I think, apparent to me. It was necessary to do this in the parliamentary context, because there are good organisations who work for women victims of these particular religiously discriminatory rulings, and there are organisations like One Law for All. However good their work is, however good their conferences may be, that's not actually going to change anything. Change has to come within Parliament. So I've been introducing this private members bill, which is trying to address these issues, and we had a very good second reading, October the 19th last year. I want to build it slowly because they're complex, sensitive issues, and it's so important that we get it right as we go along. So the second reading was superb, and a lot of support from all around the House, including Conservative and Lib Dems and Labour. And one person who didn't speak but has been very supportive is Lord Mackay of Clashfern, of course a very well-respected Christian former Lord Chancellor. And then Alex Carlile, who is a Lib Dem, very famous human rights lawyer, and Lord Dalaki, who's a Hindu, who heads up the Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords, and Lord Singh of Wimbledon, who is a Sikh and gave a wonderful speech in which he quoted that hymn, "Once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide," and also the famous quotation, "For all it requires for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing." And he said, "You have my full support and that of my community." So we're building support in the parliamentary arena, and I'm going to reintroduce the bill as soon as I can with the new Parliament after the next state opening of Parliament. And as a parallel initiative, I'm in the process of trying to establish an all-party parliamentary group on honour-based violence and abuse, because that's a very serious aspect of this bigger picture. I would love Christians to respond, first of all, with prayer, because these are complex and sensitive issues, and they're also very complex legal issues, and I'm no lawyer. I do have wonderful lawyer friends and colleagues and supporters, but they are challenging issues, so we do need wisdom and discernment and a right judgment in all things. We also need people, and particularly a government, that will have the courage to actually go against all the inhibitions of political correctness, whereby they'll be afraid of being called Islamophobic, or they'll be afraid of being called racist. It's nothing to do with Islamophobia or racism, it's to do with women's rights and democracy in this country. And the other sort of inhibition which tends to apply is a so-called multiculturalism. We will condone this because it's cultural. Well, I'm sorry, we have laws, we have values, and there is no way that cultural policies which are incompatible with our laws and values, which stem from our Judeo-Christian heritage, should be allowed to override those. If women are suffering in this country in ways that are antithetical to our present laws, our policies and our values, then the fact that it may be culturally condoned is not a reason for not taking that issue on and stopping practices that are, some of them, quite barbaric.
Baroness Caroline Cox there, and another woman leader here in Parliament is Fiona Bruce, MP for Congleton. She's introduced a bill into Parliament highlighting her concerns over abortion statistics. She explains more about what the bill was about. Fiona Bruce, MP for Congleton, introduced the Abortion Statistics 10-Minute Rule Bill this week. The bill calls on the government to publish the sex of babies being aborted where that sex can be defined, therefore highlighting the worrying trend where abortions are carried out on babies due to their sex. Fiona Bruce explains some of the most disturbing statistics surrounding the issue of sex selection taking place.
In India and in China, literally millions of young female babies are aborted. It's reckoned that possibly in China some 200 million young babies could have been aborted since the one-child policy was introduced, and many of those are women. Therefore this is a real attack, if you like, on young women. We talk about violence against women, but in my view the worst form of violence against women is one which is before they've even had a chance to breathe life. And so I quoted, for example, how in China there are some villages now where young men outnumber young women up to 30 to 1. And this is resulting in increases in prostitution, in human trafficking, in forced kidnapping of young girls in China, and indeed also in India, where girls are literally stolen to be taken, used and often imprisoned for wives. And so what I said in the House this week was anyone in this country, I believe, would condemn that as a dreadful thing.
So how can Christians support her bill, and what does she hope it will achieve?
I hope this bill will achieve a challenge to this practice, and that even the fact that I have raised the issue in Parliament will be sufficient to send out a warning to all those who may be involved in this, that it is wrong and that the authorities are not turning a blind eye to it. As far as what people can do, obviously they can pray, and I would like them to pray. I'd like them to pray about this issue, and I'd like them to pray also about the pro-life work which is going on in Parliament. I'd also like them to take part in a consultation which the government have launched. The Department of Health have launched a consultation on abortion statistics. Completely coincidentally, the day before I brought forward this bill. The consultation is seeking to establish from people how they feel that abortion statistics can be produced so as to be most relevant and obviously helpful. And I think therefore if people watching this programme can contribute to that consultation, it's only started on the 15th of April, so it's running for a few weeks, and make a comment on how they feel abortion statistics should be reported, in particular that we do need to start reporting on the abortion ratios between young boys and young girls, so that we really can see how widespread this problem is and tackle it, if need be, in a more constructive way.
In this week's programme, we've been highlighting the importance of leaders standing up on issues that aren't always popular among people. Now, we wanted to show you this inspirational video this week that highlights how one person can impact many, many lives around the world.
One more push. You got it, babe. You got it.
And now we're going to show you a short video from some of our students that took part in the Wilberforce Academy that had a very creative way of expressing their experience at the Wilberforce Academy.
Wilberforce Academy 2013. What an amazing God to bring together such a team. From all over the world, a diverse network. Looking at the state of our nation. Innovation. In the best time to be awake as a Christian.
With world-class speakers, biblical teachers, working in the fields, unashamed preachers.
Faith without works is dead. Wilberforce helps us set aside our pride, to see the issue in our culture and realize, to not sit, but to arise.
So, daring to dream the impossible, Britain needs an operation in God's hospital, sharing God's love in not compromising on the biblical.
Change people, change culture. This isn't a conference, but the beginning of our future. With Britain falling apart, we will answer. 2014. Will you join the adventure?
A venture, a movement that will be written in history. We will not be a silent generation with our thoughts being a mystery, but instead, not ashamed, leaving a legacy, as what happens next will echo into eternity. The time to arise is now.
One of the issues we're always keen to highlight here at Christian Concern is freedom of speech in this country. Coming up is the story of Mike Overd. Christian Legal Centre took up his case when he was arrested when he was preaching on the streets.
Well, it's now the final day of the Wilberforce Academy, and joining me today I've got Michael Overd, who was sharing with us yesterday all about his story and how he stood up for what he believes in and how he believes in Jesus. So thank you for speaking to me today.
Thank you.
So would you mind just explaining to us what happened?
Well, basically, I was preaching with a group of other Christians in Taunton High Street, and I read from 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 9 to 11. The list of sins before what I really wanted to focus on, the new creation. And one of the words in that list was the word homosexuality. And as I came to that word, two men walked past me from behind on my right, holding hands. And I didn't want to say that word because of the political climate that we live in and the repercussions that can come from calling homosexuality a sin. But I felt to say it, and I did. And it was almost as all hell got let loose. The two men extremely violent in their words and what they wanted to do to me and hurt me, and they spat at me. And the long and the short of it was I met them again a second time and I appealed to them, and they pressed charges, and the police took the case to the CPS and we went to court. And I got arrested under Section 4A, I think, on Section 4A and Section 5 of the Public Misdemeanor Acts.
So how did you feel when all of this was going on, knowing that you were speaking the truth?
I think my main point when they first came was I cared for the two men. You know, there's an enormous 80% increase in bowel disorder in the gay community. Average lifespan of a gay man is 55 years old. You know, if I love and care for these guys, that should concern me. And eternity for their souls, or their disbelief in Jesus. So that was my initial concern for the men, and then shock at the violence. Because I've faced anger before, but not to that degree. Yeah.
So what happened then once you were arrested? What was the process that went through after that?
Well, it was interesting the day I was arrested, because I've got a real bad back condition, so I was resting at home. I just preached in the town on the Wednesday, and there was a knock at the door, and I got up, and it was a policeman and a policewoman, and I just thought they were coming for a cup of tea and a chat, because sometimes there's problems and issues, people complain. But they came in and said, no, we've come to arrest you. And I just said, boxer shorts, shorts on and a T-shirt, and I said, it's okay, I can get dressed then if I've got to go down to the station. And the policeman had to come up. He said, yeah, but I'll have to come up with you and make sure you don't disguise any weapons with you.
So what was your faith like at that time?
Rock solid. But you see, God does that. He brings you to that place. One of the dear ladies asked about that in the application group yesterday. How do you cope with that? Well, you see, he doesn't just drop you in at the deep end. It's a steps of faith, and you're built up and equipped to that position. So they offered me a caution. Would I take a caution? Which in effect implies I'm guilty to some degree. And then it would make it very difficult for me to preach in the future, and others in the town as well. So that was my Peter moment. Do I take the caution and run out on Christ, or do I stand and do I say, no, take this to court?
So you then went to court?
Yes. Yes.
And the outcome of that was?
Not guilty, yeah. Which is, in today's climate, sadly, against true Christianity, is very rare now. But a friend of mine who was a witness who came along made the very relevant point. This was for the gospel, and this was for the public proclamation of the gospel, which is essential in this nation. It's out of fashion now to be a street preacher, and just no props, the good and the bad news against sin and the love of God. That's not popular in the church, and they're my fiercest opponents.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Now, what's great about your story is the fact that actually you were said to not guilty, and then you went back out the next day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for my generation today, what would you say as in some action points that you would advise them to do?
I would just say, just don't be afraid. What is there to fear when God is for us, and who can be against us? If you had the President of the United States on your side, or the Prime Minister of our country, would you fear? No, we wouldn't. Well, we've got Almighty God, Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, and all the angels of heaven, and stand firm and believe the promises that he gives us, and focus your eyes on the Lord, and just love him. He'll do the rest.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to speak to you. Well, thank you for watching, and it's been Emily for the Christian Weekly News.
So thanks for joining us on this week's edition of Christian Weekly News. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our weekly emailings called Christian Weekly News, and follow our YouTube channel, ccfon.org. And don't forget to join us again at the same time next week.